In the spring of 2009, Michael Jackson sat across from his longtime friend and collaborator in a quiet corner of a Los Angeles recording studio. The conversation was supposed to be about his upcoming comeback tour. Instead, Michael looked his friend in the eye and said something that would haunt him for years to come. "They're going to kill me for this." His friend laughed it off. Everyone did. Michael had always been dramatic, theatrical, prone to grand statements. But in the months that followed his death on June 25th, 2009, those who were closest to him began piecing together a disturbing pattern. Michael hadn't just predicted his death, he'd been trying to warn everyone who would listen. This is the story of those warnings, the conversations, the fears, and the chilling accuracy of what Michael Jackson knew was coming. Let's go back to 2003. Michael Jackson was in the middle of what would become one of the darkest periods of his life. The allegations, the trial, the media circus that consumed everything. But according to his longtime attorney Brian Oxman, something shifted in Michael during this time. He started talking differently about his future. Oxman recalls a conversation they had late one night at Neverland Ranch. Michael was exhausted, physically and emotionally drained from depositions. Out of nowhere, he told Oxman, "They want me gone. They want everything I own, and then they want me gone." When Oxman asked who they were, Michael just shook his head. He couldn't say it out loud, or maybe he didn't fully know himself, but the fear was real. Now, you have to understand something about Michael Jackson in 2003. This wasn't the invincible superstar of the Thriller era. This was a man who had been betrayed repeatedly, sued constantly, and vilified publicly for over a decade. Paranoia? Maybe. But those close to him insist it was something deeper. Michael had seen the machine up close. He knew how the music industry worked. He owned the Beatles catalog, worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He had leverage, assets, and power that made certain people very uncomfortable. His friend and magician Uri Geller remembers Michael calling him around this same time, speaking in hushed tones about his fears. "Uri, if something happens to me, you have to tell people I didn't do it to myself," Michael said. Geller tried to reassure him, but Michael cut him off. "I'm serious. They're circling. I can feel it." Fast forward to 2008. Michael was living in Las Vegas, working on new music, planning what would become the This Is It tour. He was thin, visibly exhausted, but his creative energy was still there. His bodyguard Javon Beard spent nearly every day with him during this period, and he noticed something disturbing. Michael had started talking about death constantly. Not in a suicidal way, Beard insists, but as if he was trying to prepare people for an inevitable outcome. He'd say things like, "Make sure my kids know I love them," or "If I'm not here, make sure they get everything," Beard recalls. At first, I thought he was just being a protective father, but the frequency increased. It wasn't occasional anymore, it was daily. Michael's dermatologist and close friend Arnold Klein noticed it too. In one of their last appointments together, Michael asked Klein point blank, "If something happens to me, will you tell people the truth about my health?" Klein assured him nothing was going to happen, but Michael persisted. "Promise me the truth about everything." By March 2009, Michael Jackson had agreed to do 50 shows at the O2 Arena in London. It was supposed to be his grand return, the redemption tour that would remind the world why he was the king of pop. But behind the scenes, Michael was falling apart. And he knew it. His choreographer and longtime collaborator Travis Payne remembers Michael pulling him aside during an early rehearsal. They were alone in the studio, music still echoing off the walls. Michael looked at him with an intensity Payne had never seen before and said, "If I die during this, it's not an accident. Remember that, it's not an accident." Payne laughs about it now, but not because it's funny. It's the kind of laugh that comes from deep discomfort from knowing something terrible is about to be revealed. "I told him to stop talking like that," Payne says, but Michael just nodded, like he'd said what he needed to say. Around this same time, Michael's friend Deepak Chopra received a phone call. Michael was agitated, speaking quickly, saying he couldn't sleep. Chopra, who had helped Michael with addiction issues in the past, immediately recognized the signs. Michael was asking for something to help him rest, something strong. Chopra refused, but Michael's response stuck with him. "They're pushing me too hard. My body can't take this schedule, but if I don't do it, I lose everything." Who was pushing him? Michael mentioned AEG Live, the promoters behind the tour. He mentioned advisors, managers, people whose names he wouldn't say out loud on the phone. But the message was clear. Michael felt trapped. The tour wasn't just a comeback. It was a financial necessity orchestrated by forces beyond his control. Kenny Ortega, the director of This Is It, saw Michael deteriorate in real time. By June 2009, just weeks before Michael's death, Ortega sent an email to AEG executives expressing grave concerns. Michael was cold, shivering, unable to perform basic choreography. Ortega wrote, "He needs to be psychologically and physically evaluated. Something is very wrong." But here's what's chilling. According to people close to Michael, he had predicted this exact scenario months earlier. His longtime makeup artist Karen Faye recalls Michael telling her in April, "They're going to work me to death. I'm telling you, Karen, this is how it ends." Faye tried to encourage him, told him he was strong enough to make it through. Michael just smiled sadly and said, "You'll see. You'll all see." Michael's mother, Katherine Jackson, had similar conversations with her son. In a deposition years after his death, she described Michael calling her late at night, crying, saying he was scared. "Scared of what?" she asked. "Of them," he replied. When she pressed him for details, Michael would change the subject or hang up. But Katherine Jackson is certain of one thing. Her son knew his life was in danger, and he knew who was responsible. June 2009. Michael Jackson had less than a month to live, though no one knew it yet. Rehearsals for This Is It were in full swing at the Staples Center in Los Angeles. Michael was showing up, going through the motions, but those around him could see he was barely holding on. His personal assistant, Michael Amir Williams, remembers one particularly disturbing conversation from mid-June. Michael asked him to sit down, said he needed to tell him something important. "If anything happens to me, it's murder," Michael said flatly. Williams was stunned. "Don't say that, Mr. Jackson. Nothing's going to happen." But Michael insisted. "I'm telling you now so you'll know. It's murder. They want the catalog. The catalog. The Beatles catalog. The Sony ATV music publishing catalog that Michael owned 50% of. Worth over $1 billion. Michael had been fighting with Sony for years over control of this catalog. He wanted to leave it to his children. Sony wanted to buy him out. The tension was escalating, and Michael believed his refusal to sell made him a target. LaToya Jackson, Michael's sister, later revealed that Michael told her the same thing during a phone call just 2 weeks before his death. "They're going to kill me for my publishing," he said. LaToya thought he was being paranoid, that the stress of the tour was making him irrational. But Michael was insistent. "I'm telling everyone. I want everyone to know. If I end up dead, it wasn't an accident." Dr. Conrad Murray entered Michael's life in May 2009, hired as his personal physician to help him get through the grueling rehearsal schedule. Michael's friends were immediately suspicious. They didn't know Murray, didn't trust him, and couldn't understand why Michael needed a full-time doctor for a concert tour. But according to Michael's head of security, Fahim Muhammad, Michael himself expressed doubts about Murray early on. Muhammad claims Michael told him, "I don't trust this doctor," but they insisted on him. Who insisted? Michael wouldn't say directly, but he implied it came from AEG, the tour promoters who were paying Murray's $150,000 monthly salary. Michael felt he had no choice but to accept the arrangement. On June 23rd, 2009, 2 days before his death, Michael gave his final full rehearsal. Video footage shows him energized, performing, seemingly ready for the tour. But after the cameras stopped rolling, Michael reportedly pulled Karen Faye aside and said, "I'm so tired, Karen. I just want to rest. But they won't let me rest." The next day, June 24th, Michael didn't show up for rehearsals. He called Kenny Ortega and said he needed a day to recover. Ortega agreed, but he was worried. That evening, Michael called several friends, including his longtime confidant and spiritual advisor, Firpo Carr. According to Carr, Michael's last words to him were, "Pray for me. I think this is it." June 25th, 2009. Michael Jackson was pronounced dead at 2:26 p.m. at UCLA Medical Center. The official cause of death, acute propofol intoxication administered by Dr. Conrad Murray. Murray was later convicted of involuntary manslaughter and served 2 years in prison. But for those who heard Michael's warnings, his predictions, his fears, the official story has never been enough. Because Michael didn't just predict his death. He predicted the circumstances, the players, the motive. How does someone do that unless they know something? LaToya Jackson was one of the first family members to publicly call it murder. At a press conference just days after Michael's death, she said, "Michael was murdered, and we're going to prove it." She pointed to the catalog, the financial pressure, the people who stood to gain from Michael's death. The Jackson family attorney later revealed that Sony bought out Michael's 50% stake in the catalog from his estate for $750 million in 2016, the very thing Michael said they wanted. Brian Oxman, who represented the Jackson family during the criminal trial, has been vocal about his belief that Michael's death was the result of a conspiracy. "Michael told us what was happening," Oxman says. "He told us who wanted him gone and why. We just didn't believe him until it was too late." There are still unanswered questions. Why was Dr. Murray hired despite his financial problems and questionable credentials? Why was he administering a surgical anesthetic in a home setting without proper monitoring equipment? Why were there signs that Michael's bedroom had been cleaned or tampered with before police arrived? The Los Angeles Police Department ruled Michael's death a homicide, but only one person was ever charged. Murray maintained that Michael begged him for propofol, that he was just trying to help his patients sleep. But those close to Michael insist he would never have requested such a dangerous drug. They believe Murray was acting on behalf of others, whether he knew it or not. In the end, we're left with the haunting words of a man who knew his time was running out. Michael Jackson spent the last years of his life warning anyone who would listen. His friends, his family, his employees. He said it wasn't paranoia. He said it was real. And on June 25th, 2009, at the age of 50, everything he predicted came true. Whether you believe it was murder, negligence, or tragic circumstance, one thing is undeniable. Michael Jackson saw it coming. He told us what would happen. We just didn't listen. His legacy lives on through his music, his children, and the millions of fans who still believe the King of Pop deserved better. But for those who heard his final warnings, the question will always remain: could we have saved him if we just believed him?